Okay, so we'll start. Welcome to the session number 3 of our Flutter Festival, which deals with handling state and data. So this will be a session on handling state and data. In last two sessions, we've already covered the Flutter basics about that and about the UI. So today, what we'll do is we'll cover the state and data. Now we know that once we've designed the app, what we need to do is we need to put in the data, and like we have already understood about the UI, that is the design, and that is the programming language that we'll use to make our app. So now we'll discuss about how we will put in the data in our app. So the things that we will be dealing with are state, now stateless versus stateful widgets, and navigation. Okay, so the first thing that we'll cover is state. State, what is state? So state in general is the info about a widget. That is what the widget does. And it can be read once the widget is built. So once the widget is built, the state is defined, like what the widget will do. And we know that Flutter uses the widget approach. That is, Flutter is designed mostly by using widgets. Now, our widgets are mainly divided into two types, that is stateless widget and stateful widget. So moving on to what is stateless widget. These are static widgets, that is they do not change their value while they are being used in the app. Like if my state of a widget is whatever we've defined it right now, it will stay the same throughout the time that we use our app. Like the color of our app, it does not change with time unless we make it change. So these stateless widgets, what they do are, they are static widgets. They are updated only when they are initialized. It is not dependent on data changes or behavior changes. Like the color of my app, you've seen the logo of Facebook, right? It in our app, it does not change according to the time unless it has been changed from the Facebook team itself. So it always remains same. Now the example of our stateless widgets are texts, icons, raised buttons. Like you see in the app, let me take for example Instagram. We have that messaging symbol and that comment icon. That comment icon always remains the same. It does not change with time. Like if I've seen that the comment icon looks this way today, tomorrow it will look the same way. It won't change. Okay, so now let me give you an example how we use the stateless widget in our app. I hope my screen is visible. Will you confirm once? Okay. So here what I did was I wrote a code snippet where I've defined a stateless widget. As I told you, stateless widgets are those which does not change with time. So here I have given a class my app. This is my main function. As we know that when we code, there should be a main function which will determine how our app will work. So I have named it my app. It is a stateless widget, and we also have a snippet for it. Like when I write STLESS, see, I just wrote STLESS and it gave me the emit for it. So what I had to do was I just have to write the class name that I'll give, and I'll write what I want to do with my widget. So these are small emit abbreviations that you can use, which will help you. I've already written a code here. So now you see there's this widget build, which I'm overriding, and then I have written inside this what I want to show in my app. Like I have written right now hello world. Now this text won't change if I click here. This is my emulator. If I click, this won't change. We see that whatever I do, this text won't change. So as I define stateless widgets, they don't change with time, and yes, this won't change with time. Okay. Now moving on to, we'll go and see about stateful widgets. Okay. I hope the slide is visible. Stateful widgets. Stateful widgets are dynamic in nature. That is, if we perform an action, these widgets change their nature or they change their value. It is dependent on changes when user interacts. That is, you have to interact in order to change those values. For example, sliders. Instagram has that slider thing where you can, put a degree of how much you like a picture or not. And you have that check boxes and radio buttons. We've already seen those things in the apps we use. Like, yes, so these all things come under stateful widgets, and this I'll show you example of stateful widgets. Okay. Now if we see, this is my app. This is the widget I've put to define you what is stateful widget. So what I've done is I've named the same my class app, extended to a stateful widget. I've used this keyword, and then create state is equal to my app state. Now we define the state for our stateful widget. As we know that it is going to change its state, like it is going to change its value when we perform a function. So here I have a counter, okay, and I have initialized it to 0 in the starting. Now I want that whenever I press this button, this number changes. So I am changing the value of this number while running this program. So now if I push add number, you can see that 0 changed to 1. So what I have done is I have initialized counter with 0 initially. Then what I'll do is whenever I click this button, I want this value to change. So I have defined that inside this button, when I press this button, it will increment counter. And what I mean with increment counter is with this function is my counter variable, which I had set to 0, will increase its value. So when I press this, the number changes. So we can see that what did stateful widget mean? That it was going to change its value when I did interactions with it, and that is what happens. When I push it, the value changes. So this is how my stateful widget works. Now we'll move to navigation. Okay, so let us take an example. Let us think about Amazon. Okay, so we've been browsing a lot of things, and now I liked a particular product. My app is not going to be of one page, because that won't be any help to me. Now I liked a particular product and I want to see if more about the product. So what I do is I click on that particular product and I am redirected to a page where I can see about the product. What is the cost of the product? What are the reviews and other things? So what I did was the page did change, right? I went from this page to another page where I had product details. So navigation deals with that. Through navigation, we change pages or screens. In a very layman term, we change the screens. Okay. So now, for navigation, the terms which we should understand are routes. In Flutter terminology, screen or pages are referred to as routes. And while navigating, we make use of these routes. Now, in order to navigate, another thing that we will use is navigator. So, I'll give you an example of how to navigate between pages. So, the basic steps that we will follow is, firstly, we'll create two screens. In order to explain this thing, I'll create two screens, then I'll define routes for these both screens, and I'll navigate between them using these functions. To move to the next screen, I'll use push named function, navigator dot push named function, and to move to the previous screen, I'll use navigator dot pop function. So let me show you an example. Okay, so we saw in the slide that the first thing in order to navigate was that we had to have two screens so that we can navigate in between them. So the first thing I have done here is I have declared two screens. This is my first class first screen, which is the stateless widget because I don't want it to change during the application of a program. So what I've done here is, this is a simple screen where I have a button, launch screen, and when I'll press it, we'll go to the second page. So this is my first screen, and when I push this button, I'll go back to this screen. And this screen too has been defined in a similar way. And when I push this button, I'll go back to this. So what I did first was, I first declared about two screens and how I want it to be. I want to have an app bar, so I gave an app bar. I wanted to have the title first screen, so I gave here the first screen thing. Then at the center, I wanted to have a button. I wanted to have an elevated button. So at the center, I had an elevated button, which on pressing, what it did was, like I told you, navigator.push named function moved it to a second page. Okay, so we'll see about this again. So this was just the UI. Let me first explain you about the UI. I had this app bar, I had a title, I had this button. In the second screen, likewise, I had an app bar, I had a title, I had a button. Now, the second thing that we need to do is, we need to give routes. Now, these routes define our pages. Okay, for the first screen, that is my initial route. That is the initial route here. And what we do is, we give this routes. These routes are defined in our main function. So this initial route, it gives us the route, like as I told, the route is the screen or the page. So the initial route is the page that we'll look into when we first start the application. Like I start this application and the page that I'm going to see is given by the initial route. So here is the initial route for this. Now for the first like when I open my app, what I want to see is this first screen. So my initial route will be given to this first screen. So I use this initial route for this first screen. And then I define another route, that is this, and second, and then this is pointing to our second screen. Like see, here we have named it first screen. So this points to our first screen. Then for the second screen, we had the name second screen. So my second route, like I've named it simplicity, you can give it any name. I can give it XYZ, whatever. And this route will point up to this second screen. But you have to name it the class that you've given. Like I've given first screen class name to my first screen. So I've given constant first screen. Then same with this. Okay. Now once we have given names of our routes, what we'll do is, what we want is, when I press this button, I go to the second page. For going to the next page, what we'll do is navigator dot push name, and we'll give this context, then the route name, that is the page where we want to navigate. I want to navigate to the second page, and for that the name I gave was second, this slash second. So what I'll do is push name context second. Now I'll use launch screen and I'm on the second screen. Now when I push this button was defined in my second screen, so I'll go to my second screen class. Here we go to this button option, and on pressing, what I want this button to do is take me to the first screen. And as I told you, to take me to the previous screen, what I use is navigator.pop next context, because we are going to the first screen, so we don't need to define a route here. Because we had only 2 pages and our first screen was our initial route. So this is the way. Now when I press go back, I'll go to my first screen. So what we did basically was, we defined 2 screens, we gave them the routes, we defined the routes, and then we used navigator.pushName and navigator.pop to traverse between both these pages. So this was just an overview I can say about navigation. And now we'll move on to our question and answer session. If anyone has any doubts, they can put it forward. So thank you for joining for this session. I hope there are no doubts. If you have any doubts, you can put up your doubts in our Discord. And yes, someone will be there to clear your doubts. So thank you for joining, and that's all for today's session. Thank you.